Thank you. It's just coming up to 10 minutes to 9. Funding of the health service has prompted angry exchanges in the Assembly in recent weeks. The Health Minister, Michael McGimpsey, has warned it's in danger of collapse, while the First Minister, Peter Robinson, accuses him of shroud-waving and electioneering. But what's the real story behind the political rhetoric? How much funding does the health service here need? Is it getting too much or not enough? Well, Professor Hugh McKenna from the University of Ulster is a health specialist, and he joins me now in the studio. And on the line is the economist, John Simpson. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Professor McKenna, near bankruptcy is how the head of the Health and Social Care Board described the health service here. Is that your reading of it?
Well, yes, but I'd like to start off by saying that this is the only health service in the world where care is free at the point of need. Also, we are the envy of the world. If you look at the US, they're spending 18% of their GDP on healthcare. Germany spend about 12%, France about 10.5%, and in the UK we're only spending 8%. However, demand is going up. We know that by 2014 there are going to be about 50,000 more people in Northern Ireland. About 50% of them will be over 65, so more chronic diseases, more chronic illnesses, and therefore there's going to be a huge demand. And if we don't increase the amount of cash going into the health service, if we don't have savings, then in fact it's heading for bankruptcy.
Well, what about savings? Take France, for example. They pay their consultants about half of what we pay consultants here. Is that part of the problem? Do we pay some sections of the health service way too much money?
There's a lot that we need to look at. There's at least 20 things that I think should be on the table. We know, for example, if you stand on your tippy toes in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, you'll see 3 A&E departments. Do we need 3 A&E departments? We know that we've too many hospitals.
Just one point on that, because this is a very convincing debate and argument that people put forward. But take the 3 A&E departments. If you close one of them, are the other two well enough equipped to cope with the extra demand? I mean, that is part of the problem. We may have too many hospitals, but do we have big enough space? Do we have the logistics in situ there to cope with extra people coming to the other two hospitals?
If you have 3 A&E departments, you're going to need to staff those 3 A&E departments. That needs to be looked at in terms of efficiency savings, because within a short geographical distance that we have those 3 A&E departments at the moment, you can have 1 A&E department that is well staffed, that is high quality. And I think that's possible. Also, Northern Ireland, population 1.7 million, but the size of Sheffield, do we really need 16 hospitals?
John Simpson, this is part of the problem, isn't it? And the difficulty is that most politicians won't vote to close hospitals in their own area. So we end up with the situation we had over maternity services, and it ends up judicial review after judicial review.
Oh, that's certainly part of the problem. But let's put it this way. Today we're talking about the budget for the health service in Northern Ireland, and words have been used, not by us here, like bankrupt. Now, the short answer to that is the word bankrupt is very silly. We're talking about a health service which, in real terms, will have 1 or 2% left to spend this year and then in the following years. And the question of coping with it. Now, you've just heard some suggestions how we should cope. And the important thing now is that we should be coping. I've done a study of the way in which the health service budget in Northern Ireland is now phased compared to the health service budget for England. And the short answer is we're getting, over 4 years, we're falling a bit behind by about 1%. And that, obviously, we would want not to happen. But we still haven't got the plans to implement the changes that we've just been talking about. And the Minister has got the McKinsey report, which has given him very detailed suggestions. We heard just now about 20 suggestions. The McKinsey report is even more. There is scope for change, but we can't, the fact is that we're now near the 1st of April and we can't do dramatic change overnight. So we're walking into a situation where the health service will have a budget which is inadequate. Yes, inadequate, but they're not broke. And we have a management problem as to how to manage to get through the next year and then the following years.
But closing hospitals and reducing some of the pay scales that consultants get, they're not new. We've probably been talking about this for very many years. So
we have been talking about closing hospitals in Northern Ireland certainly for 30 years, to my memory. And we know we have too many acute units. Whether or not 3 accident and emergency units in Belfast is too many, I think your question was very relevant. Belfast is quite a big city. Maybe 2 ought, in theory, to be adequate, but that's not a big saving. I think the big savings are actually likely to be on things that are not in the acute hospitals, although we need to get on changing them. The big savings are in the way in which we provide care for people living at home, healthcare at home, the way in which we provide generic drugs for prescriptions. Indeed, the big question that we haven't faced is whether we should introduce or reintroduce something like prescription charges, or we should, where there is some sort of care program that people could afford to pay for, do we have the right means tests in place?
Professor McKenna, it's very interesting. You've put forward suggestions. John Simpson's written a report. We've had McKinsey. We've had very many other detailed suggestions, but nothing ever seems to be done.
It's very political. There's no votes in closing hospitals. There's no votes in downsizing services. There's a lot more can be done in prevention to keep people out of acute hospital, the expensive sector in the first place. More can be done. Nurses can be involved in terms of nurse-led service. We know that pays off. But a point I'd like to make is that Northern Ireland is a great deal worse off in terms of mortality from many diseases in other parts of the UK. There is more smoking in Northern Ireland, obesity in Northern Ireland than in England and Wales. We know that there are more people on disability living allowance in Northern Ireland, 1 in 10 compared to 1 in 20 in England. So we have greater need for health services in Northern Ireland. So if you consider that we're less in terms of funding for health services in Northern Ireland compared to England, but we've greater need and there's going to be an increase in demand, then there's a crisis happening unless difficult decisions are made.
Professor Hugh McKenna and John Simpson, thank you very much. Interesting to hear your views this morning. Sabrina.